Hospice is a very team-centered approach to dying, because dying is a spiritual, emotional, and physical event. And so that's why we have social workers, chaplains, home health aides, nurses, doctors, volunteers on the team.
Oh, I gotta go. I've been working, told them please don't hit my phone. I'm in my zone, bruh, just leave me alone. Was on the road, but I swear I'm coming home. Now the drinks on me, I think we need a toast. See, I did it for me. Now my old friends calling, told them nothing's for free. Told me time is money, dog, swear I paid all my fees. I was starving for this game, now my family can eat.
Hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in on today's Cup of Nurses episode with your hosts here, Peter and Matt. Thank you everyone for taking time and listening. If you find value in this podcast, we improved your life in any way, we want to do that on a larger scale and impact everyone. So please share it with your loved ones, give it a subscribe, give it a follow. This is how we get more exposure, ranks us higher in the algorithms, and ultimately it motivates us to keep on producing this high quality show. If you like our merch that we have wearing right now, I think it looks smooth. These are the new designs for March. That's a dope tee.
It's a good fit.
It is. I love the tri-blend that we have. And guess what? Every single beginning of the month, starting March, we're going to have new designs coming out. So get your tee while it lasts. And if you want to check out our Frontline Warriors movement, it is based on consciousness, expanding your self-awareness, and cultivating yourself to live a better life as a human being and being embodied, suited in for those blog posts coming out every single week. And Pronto, the app that we've been working on so much behind the scenes, it is coming out very, very shortly. If you want to subscribe and get the latest updates, you could check out prontohealth.com. And yeah, let the show begin. How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing great. Another stellar introduction, Matthew. Appreciate it. But on today's show, we're going to have a guest, Beth Cavenaugh. With over 25 years of experience in internal medicine, short-stay surgery, and hospice care, she understands firsthand that compassion in healthcare can sometimes be elusive. Her new book, The Power and Pain of Nursing, aims to arm both new and seasoned nurses with the tools necessary to care for themselves in the face of one of the most demanding professions in the world. Come check us out as we talk about the end-of-life process, hospice care and hospice nursing, compassion in nursing, and the emotions involved in grieving and the dying process. Thanks so much, Beth, for being here. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself? What did you do? What kind of nursing did you do? And kind of where you are in life right now?
Sure. Thanks for having me. And I've been a nurse for 25 years. My first job was in a nursing home, and I lasted just 3 weeks because I was the night shift charge nurse and in charge of 22 to 33 patients. And I'd just come out of nursing school. And it was also graveyard shift, and I start to mentally deteriorate around 7:30 p.m. So I left. I've worked at an AIDS hospice for a couple of years. I worked in internal medicine for a couple of years. I worked in short stay surgery for a couple of years, realizing you can actually make a significant impact in somebody's life in just 30 minutes. I really loved that. And I also had little kids then. So it was a great job in terms of time frame. I didn't have to work holidays. We weren't open on Sundays. And it was just like a great vibe. The whole place was really fun. And then after a while, I just felt like I wanted a little more, just to look and see if there was anything else out there for me. And that's when I landed at this really sweet hospice home in Portland, Oregon. And I just completely fell in love with the place. The nurses were really amazing educators. It was a great culture of compassion, really good, meaningful work, taking care of people who are dying. And they had free scones, which was kind of a bonus. Since then, I've been in hospice in various parts of it. I worked in that inpatient home for about 7 years. I worked in home hospice. I worked in the background of hospice intake and team lead. I worked in hospitals doing conferences with families and patients who wanted to know more about hospice. And the home hospice, I think, was the most difficult job because you're just like a lot of times it's driving around at night without any cell service and, eating at Sherry's at 4 a.m, and trying to find all of your tools in your trunk. So that was actually the hardest job for me. But right now I'm at an inpatient hospice unit, which I love. And I feel like that's where my heart is for sure.
With Matt and I being ICU nurses from our nursing background, I've never really had a lot of experience with hospice patients. We do have some people that pass away in the ICU, but nothing you could say as like homeful as actual hospice care, because a lot of patients unfortunately don't go into hospice care. They pass away just abruptly, you could say. So what's kind of like the day-to-day of a hospice nurse?
Well, for me, in our inpatient hospice unit, usually take 4 to 7 patients, depending on what shift you work. And you kind of go from room to room and circle around, make sure everybody has what they need, give their medications, make sure their symptoms are managed. If they're having like a pain crisis or something like that, you work really closely with the doctor to get their pain under control. If they're having, if you realize that they're having some spiritual issues, maybe talking about their fear of dying, I will connect with the chaplain and make sure the chaplain knows and make sure my teammates know. And if there's some family dynamic issue, or maybe the patient wants to leave our inpatient unit and live somewhere else, I'll connect with the social worker that we have on site there to kind of help facilitate that process. A lot of it is just really establishing a relationship with the patient, establishing trust with them, being able to be with them during these moments of vulnerability. A lot of them are afraid. Educating the family about death and dying and what it looks like. That's a big part of what we do is education. Most people have kind of the same questions about dying. What does it look like? How long will it take? When should I feed my mom? Should I not feed my mom? So that's a lot of what I do. And it's just kind of circling back and forth between my patients on my shift. Home hospice is different in that you go into patients' homes wherever they are. You can go into a nursing home, or if they live in a bus down by the river, you go there. I've been on a little sailboat before taking care of a patient in their homes, big homes, little homes, everything. So they go to their homes and they have all their supplies in the trunk, the nurse does. And, they'll spend some time with the patient, kind of navigating their medications, making sure they have what they need medication wise, make sure their symptoms are being managed. We listen to the heart, the lungs, the whole, physical assessment, make sure they have everything they need, and then collaborate with the team as well. Hospice is a very team-centered approach to dying, because dying is a spiritual, emotional, and physical event. And so that's why we have social workers, chaplains, home health aides, nurses, doctors, volunteers on the team. That was a long answer.
Yeah, hospice, you seem to be working from a very empowered place, and learning about that's a great perspective. Peter and I feel like we see like the sadder part where in the ICU there's really nothing else we can do, and sometimes we see patients and the family in the process of grieving and not accepting, and I feel like we don't see the other side because there's other agencies that take over that part. And the thing I know about hospice is more about discharging and readmitting the patient, but we don't see the other aspect that you're bringing up. So I feel like that's very important for everyone to know. So how do you empower nurses in the hospice area to continue that compassion? Because I feel like fatigue is such a big part of the pandemic and everything happening right now.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that acknowledging that the system is a bit sucky is kind of important because, all nurses work in conditions that are pretty challenging. There's a National Academy of Medicine. They have this amazing website for clinicians, and they discuss the systemic difficulties of the clinician job that lead to burnout. And they list the job demands like inadequate staffing, constant interruptions, administrative duties, policies, processes, moral distress, inadequate technology. So I think just acknowledging that the system is really a difficult system to work in can be empowering, because really that's the most important thing that needs to be changed. I think if people are feeling morally distressed, it's also important to know that it's not you. There's this woman from the UVA nursing school. Her name's Ashley Hurst. And she had this quote that said, "You are not broken. You are not what needs to be fixed." And she's talking to the clinicians, all healthcare providers. But for nurses, I think that, it's not going to be simple self-care practices that fix this and bring you empowerment. I think that this statement that we're not broken kind of makes me relax a little bit and realize, it's not me. Like, maybe I can try to fix this. And it might feel kind of overwhelming, but I don't know, it's kind of a relief to know that it's not just you. You're not the problem. So I think that remembering that like self-compassion is really important, kind of along the same lines. Self-compassion is recognizing the humanity in your suffering. So recognizing that there is a global suffering that's going on here amongst all nurses, probably. And recognizing that that it's okay. So not being harsh with yourself. Once I realized this very late in my career, but when I was writing my book, The Power and Pain of Nursing, the gentleman I was working with, Dominic Vachon, said that compassionate care leads to better patient outcomes. And I was like, it felt a little mind-blowing. Whereas like negative care can lead to negative outcomes. And it just kind of shocked me how much the way I show up for my job is so important. And the way that I care for my patients is so important. And believe me, like I wrote this book because I am in constant practice of trying to figure out how to be compassionate to my patients and myself and my family. And I'm definitely not perfect and not even close. But I think that realizing that caring, compassionate care leads to better outcomes might make it easier to advocate for nurses, because when we're advocating for nurses and empowered, then we're actually really advocating for our patients too, which is kind of a no-brainer, right? So it was easier for me to advocate for better staff ratios or increased staff on the weekends when there's no administrative help, or better, more, mainstreamed processes. I also think it's really important to have good leaders. Of course, I think it's really hard to be angry at your manager. It's hard to be pissed off and compassionate at the same time, and I think nurses have a lot of validity to being angry right now, because I think a lot of people feel kind of let down by the system. So finding good leaders, if you're not working right now, find a place that has a really good supportive manager. Remembering that change does not happen overnight, especially in a big system. And I think the more nurses you have kind of advocating for change, the better. Just numbers. I think, people will listen to a few more numbers. And it doesn't mean you have to be like an angry, bitchy crew of nurses who want change. I think it can be a really respectful, kind, process where you're simply advocating for nurses and also, in the end, your patients.
Right. That's the hardest thing for nurses, is to advocate for ourselves, because we see so much struggles, and how the patient's life overall is affected by poor health or by serious injuries or anything like that, that it's like you're okay to live with certain issues because you know that somebody else has it worse than you. But you can't always think like that. That's how you can't incorporate change if you're always okay with what's going on. If you're okay with the water temperature, you're never going to warm the water up. And it's like
Right,
that.
right.
It's that big sympathy. It's almost like a double-edged sword where it's like we have so much sympathy and so much love for others that we forget to love ourselves. And the best way, like you said, the best way to help patient outcomes is to be happy to go to your workplace. Be happy where you spend a majority of your hours. And it's really tough for nurses to figure out.
And especially as travelers, we've seen so many units in different cultures that you can tell which nurse is going to have which patient is going to have a great positive outcome with the nurse that they're paired with. And that's why things happen where sometimes the family calls and says, hey, I prefer if it's not that nurse. And if you're a software human, you can figure out those things in people's behavior. So yeah, you make a good point how you can't be pissed off and have compassion at the same time. So we have to treat ourselves well to have that compassion, but also the system, just like you mentioned, we need to advocate on a smaller level for ourselves to change things from the unit to the hospital to eventually to the collective.
So Beth, one issue that I've seen a lot of nurses have is especially when they go through, like you could say, a drought of having a lot of patients pass on them or having bonded with a patient. Sometimes in an ICU, we have patients that stay over there 2 weeks, 3 weeks, months, and you see them slowly, you could say, degress and decline in life. But they're still holding conversation, they're still talking to them. And a lot of times, those nurses are unable to flip the work switch off, and they bring that stuff home with them. All the negativity, all that sadness that they experience in a hospital, and making these connections and having people pass away, that it takes a toll in their personal life. So how can nurses kind of avoid that, having that kind of an issue?
I don't, I'm definitely not a mental health professional. So I know I don't have I don't have the right answers probably, but for me, dealing with so much suffering in hospice that I do, I've done a lot of work to maintain some equanimity. And I took this class one time on compassionate care of the dying. And there was a Buddhist priest there who talked about having a soft front and a strong back. And it really resonated with me that you can have the soft front is basically your empathy. You are resonating with your patient's emotions, the sadness, the suffering. You are resonating with the family and their distress. And that is a really beautiful connection. And that is actually the stuff that will feed your soul as a nurse. However, at the same time, you have to have this strong back, which is this knowing deep in your bones that patients suffer, people die all the time. Sometimes infections come back, cancers recur. It's just knowing that this is part of our shared humanity, is these really difficult things to be close to. So one of the, so having a soft front and strong back, and I say it like it's no big deal. Like you can just show up and go, oh, okay, today I'm going to have a soft front, strong back. But it really actually requires practices. And again, I'm always working on this, always, forgetting, trying again. But having practices like meditation are actually really helpful to establish some equanimity so that you have more composure when, there are big earth-shaking events going off and you personally are emotionally devastated by it. I mean, I love it. Honestly, when I feel deep sadness or if I cry in the kitchen like I have before at my work, it just makes me feel human. Like I never want to lose that. However, it's just really, it's a lot of work to kind of do these practices. I mean, you have to do, I think one of the questions that you had in your thing was, what are the main things to bolster compassion or boost compassion? And it's in my humble opinion, it's meditation or mindfulness practices. It's an embodiment practice. So anything that kind of helps with your kind of physical processing of all the stuff you take in. So maybe it's yoga, maybe it's a body scan, maybe it's just lying down and kind of feeling your body, try to relax. And the other one is self-compassion, of course, because it's really hard to take in all this stuff, and we want to be perfect, and we want to go home and be perfect to our families, and that is just not going to happen. So there is a researcher, Kristen Neff, who does a lot of work on self-compassion, and she has a ton of education, meditation videos that people can access to kind of help restore and strengthen that self-compassion. Sorry, did I go off on a tangent?
It's okay. It's good. It's good. Yeah, that's very important. Everything that you said was super important for us to learn, and people have to realize that the first thing to good patient care is also having really good self-care, because it works both ways. Like think about it, like with other religions, they always say that, you know, we all come from one, so we are all one. That's kind of like the same thing as it is. If your patient's suffering, you're going to suffer a little bit as well. And if you're having a really good day, your patient's also going to have a pretty good day. And that's kind of how it works in synergy, and it all works together.
Yeah, I love that. There's this one story. I'm really bad with remembering names, but I think it's the author of
That's
Compassion.
okay. It makes two of us.
Okay, good. It's the author of, I think the story is about the author of Compassionomics, which is Stephen Turzak, or I think that's how you pronounce his name. But he was on a ventilator in the ICU, and he was not doing well. And he was aware, but he was unable to communicate to people. And the number one thing that inspired him while he was lying on the bed was the nurse that came in. And the nurse could either make him feel like, I can do this, or actually like lose his will to live and go, oh, forget it, like I can't do this, which I found really kind of earth-shattering, that we can have such a huge impact on people. And it shouldn't be earth-shattering, but it is. These shifts that we have can be remarkably powerful to yourself and also to your patients.
You make a very good point, because if I come into the room with a negative mindset, or something has bothered me from home, and my patient is anxious, so I have the same emotional charge like he does, and I'm like, just chill out, everything's okay. You're not, just take a deep breath, you're fine. But if you don't have empathy and you come off like that emotionally, you're not going to help that patient anymore, and it's going to lead to worse problems and things like that.
Yeah. True. So true.
One of my issues always when I was a young nurse was I always had you could say, a disconnect between my emotions with, I would say, death and dying and people passing on, because for a long time I associated with the dying process and death and end of life care as like fear. I was always scared of it, like not being able to, because as humans we always want to be in a world where you can predict as much things as we can. We like to be comfortable. And it's like, death is the most uncomfortable thing, because you can't predict it and you can't do anything about it in most cases. But then I read a lot of like Buddhist teachings, a lot of Eastern philosophies, and they always associated with like a second life. I was raised Catholic, which I understand the concept of like heaven and hell and that kind of stuff. But for some reason I was associated death with fear. And then
it's the whole hell thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's
Face your judgment.
Yeah, face your judgment. Like, if I look back, it's like, man, I don't know. But then like the Eastern philosophy was more of like, it's just, you're on this earth to experience the earth and things around you and the way it works, the way it moves. And then once you pass away, nothing to fear, because you don't know what's there. So you're just moving on to something else. And that like blew my mind completely. And then I had a patient that I took care of for maybe like, I want to say, 7 shifts in a row, so like 3 one day, 3 next, and he ended up passing away. And we had a conversation about life, and I asked him a few questions, And he seemed like he had no fear in him. Like he was ready to embrace everything that's coming, and he wouldn't really talk much about himself. He would just keep giving advice. It was his last shine on earth, and he ended up passing away. But I had a really cool connection with the guy, and so like ever since then, I associated death and dying as not so much as a fear of the unknown, but just content with what's going to happen because you don't know, and just moving on to something else.
That is so amazing. I am curious, how far into the profession were you before you discovered this?
Oh, this was pretty early on. I want to say probably like 2 years in, because after nursing school, I went into like a real big meditation and exploring different philosophies. Because like I said, grew up Catholic, so by like age of 20, like 18ish to like 24, I want to say, I was exploring new things and looking at different teachings besides the stuff that I was taught just growing up, because I wanted to get outside perspective. And that's just when I just started getting into it. So like meditation, kind of reflecting and being content with the things that I've done and things that are going to happen into the future. Ever since then, I just kind of chilled out about the whole death situation.
That's so huge, especially when you work in healthcare, right? Because healthcare all around us, I mean, there are visible signs of our own mortality. And I mean, I remember, the first death I experienced where the patient was exactly the same age as me, 25, and it was like earth shattering. And I think it's really important to process your own death and kind of what that might look like. And as a healthcare professional, and I think it's also really important to kind of process your philosophy of care or your spirituality of care. This is what Dominic Vachon actually writes in his book, How Doctors Care. He has a beautiful chapter on spirituality of care and philosophy of care, and how, healthcare providers are constantly facing these questions like, what is this all for? Right? I mean, you have some of you guys in the ICU. I mean, you probably had countless patients on ventilators where you're like, oh my God. And that it can happen like randomly, right? One random day. So it's really important to reflect on your spirituality or your religion, whatever it is to you that gives you meaning, where you can kind of integrate your work life and your spiritual life. It makes it your job more fulfilling that way. And I love that you Peter, came to terms with your experience of what it will be like to die for you, and how you could come to a place where you found peace so that you could actually help your patients, through this process.
Right. Yeah. And nurses have to understand that, like, it's really hard to take that baggage, or it's really easy to take that baggage home with you. But it's just, in some cases, no matter how much you try, no matter how good of nursing care you do, sometimes people just have to leave this earth, and it's no one's fault. It's no one's to be blamed, and it's because it's been made to be that way. We don't live forever.
We don't.
Yeah.
Nobody does except for Elvis.
Yeah, apparently, especially in Vegas.
And it is so rewarding being on that spectrum of like life and death, where people always share some beautiful stories. Honestly, the best stories I've had with patients or talks, just like you mentioned, is when they're on the cusp. It's almost like they know, and they're completely vulnerable. Just like you said, they're very soft in their front. They share everything, or the best sunset they've seen. Like, they go so in depth into things.
Yeah.
Is there like a good approach to speaking to somebody that's going through like end of life? Because for me, what I've noticed is they don't really talk about themselves, but they reflect a lot about their past and try to offer you guidance. Maybe it's just because of the questions I asked, but that's what I noticed, that with majority of people that I get to spend some time with, and they're content with what's ahead of them, they always give you advice, but that advice always has a story behind it.
I love that you were giving advice. So, so you're wondering kind of how to help patients along in this process, or more how to help yourself, like while this is
Well, let's do both. Let's first focus on a patient. So maybe how can you help them best?
Okay. Well, I love what you did, which you didn't even know what you were doing, but you were encouraging life review. You were asking them questions, which is a really beautiful part of the dying process, and a really important part, to be able to kind of look back on your life and go, oh, like that sunset in Hawaii was so amazing. Or, I raised my daughter and she's, a teacher now, and whatever it is, anything that gives them meaning. But life review is actually really important. So if you can kind of ask questions about that. Also, I think it's really important just to ask them, what is really important to you? A lot of times with my patients, even when they're close, maybe a week away, I'll say, what's really important today? Do you want me to call one of your family? Do you want your friends over? Do you want a milkshake? I think it's important to recognize that this is, they're on a timeline here. You don't necessarily have to say it, but they're on a timeline. So let's try to make the best of it. And so what else for the patients? I think honesty and transparency is really important. Compassionately, it doesn't work for everybody, but I like to be really transparent with people. I had a patient once who, she came from the ICU. She was on a ventilator, and they weaned her from the ventilator and sent her to our hospice home. And we all thought she was dying. The family came in, the daughter was sitting in the corner knitting after like 3 days of her being unresponsive and dying. And suddenly she just, like, her eyes kind of fluttered open, and she looked around and she said, "Where am I?" And I told her where she was. And she said, "Am I dying?" And I said, "Yeah, you are dying. You've been very sick. You were in the ICU for 2 weeks on a ventilator, and the doctors say things aren't looking good." And she was so mad. She was like, "What? I'm at the hospice house?" And she was really mad at her granddaughter. And you could see her just like summon all her strength and energy. And she was not going to die. And by golly, she got out of that hospice home at like a week later. She went home. I don't even know if she signed up for hospice or if she was like, "See ya guys, I'm out of here." But so I think transparency and honesty is really important, especially if they're asking, frank questions. I think managing their symptoms is really a very important part of the process. For me, I like to make sure family and friends can be either called so they can talk to them on the phone, or so that they can come and be with them when they die, if that's what the patient wants and if that's what the family wants. And just give them whatever they need and love them up as much as you can.
Okay, I'm just so mindful about that story. So this lady was on a ventilator for 2 weeks, and she came into hospice, and then she walked out of the hospice later.
Well, she didn't walk out. She wheeled out.
Wow.
It's still, yeah. Wow, it's powerful.
Damn, that's crazy. I've never heard like a first account of that happening ever.
Oh yeah, it definitely happens. I had I can think of many stories where that patients literally came to us dying and kind of summoned enough energy to exit the hospice home and kind of go on and live, either in their homes and maybe have more time with their families in their home. So yeah, there's some really beautiful stories. We call them graduates of hospice, the ones who don't come to hospice anymore.
That's so interesting. Graduates of hospice. Wow.
Yeah.
I hope I'm that person in the future.
Yeah.
I want to take it back for a second to the self-care, because that's very big, where we just want to tell our listeners, how can they cultivate self-care? How do you personally partake in that for yourself? Is it meditation, journaling?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things. It is important to have like little routines that you kind of have to automatically kind of unwind. So on my way to work, I'll do like a little 5-minute video or meditation practice. I'll like listen to something, kind of be intentional about how I'm going to show up. Like, I'm here for my patients, be really like clear about that. While I'm at work, I try to lean into like the compassionate moments, those really like juicy moments with patients and their families. You guys know what I'm talking about, when it's just like, you feel like you've made a connection. You feel like you've really changed something for them. Maybe it's their pain, their shortness of breath, whatever it is. kind of lean into those positive moments as a nurse, because that really does, that's called compassion satisfaction, where you actually feel like you did make a difference. And that's the kind of stuff that will buffer your burning out. When I do a lot of deep breathing when I'm at work. When I come home, I try to like shower and kind of visually release the energy from the shift. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm always kind of trying different things. So I'll do mindfulness practices, I'll do meditation practices. And I definitely don't do this all the time. I'm talking like 15 minutes a day. It's not all the time. I don't have that much time to like do all these practices, but enough. So yeah, mindfulness is really a sweet practice where you can kind of just sink in, be aware of your body, be aware of your emotions, kind of relax your body and lean into the moment, whatever it is, wherever you are. So I try to do those kind of moments at home.
I love how you mentioned the compassion satisfaction, because in that moment you have that perspective of there's 10 things that are happening that suck right now on my shift, but this patient just told me a great story or his definition of what God is to him, and you forget about everything else. So because you focused on the positive there, you're not getting that negative energy throughout your shift now that you need to practice so deeply into mindfulness techniques where you're just content with that whole shift and you leave off better energetically.
Exactly. I mean, you guys probably felt that a lot. I mean, ICU, I've never worked in the ICU. I've been in the ICU before as a hospice nurse, and it's a jarring place to work, and it is full of crises and emotional crises and spiritual crises and physical crises. And I cannot even imagine. I mean, there's moments all over the place, aren't there?
Every single shift is different when you walk in. You don't know what to expect. Yeah.
I feel like that's where it's cool because, like you said, there's a lot of emotions going on the unit, especially in the ICU. A lot of things going on. I feel like that's when, because nursing is a predominantly female field. As for those of you that don't know, it's majority chicks that work.
Most of our listeners are females.
Yeah. So like it's interesting to see how the air kind of changes when you have some males on the unit.
Yeah.
Because it's like there's some kind of a presence that it makes things interesting because there's a lot of emotions going on, and women are more emotional beings. Men are not as emotional, so it's almost like we absorb some of that emotion going on in the room. That way, everyone could function and focus a little bit smoother. I feel like it might just be like a me thing, but I don't know. I feel like Matt feels the same way.
That's a cool perspective.
Like it feels different. Like everyone almost kind of like relaxes a little bit because at least they know they're gonna get boosting help for today.
And I feel like sometimes
true. It's so good to have super strong people on your shift. That's true. Yeah. And I think that you guys, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like men are probably equally emotional, but maybe they just don't show their emotions, I don't know. You guys are guys. Maybe you're not.
Yeah, Pete, you cry in the shower or what?
Sometimes, when the song hits.
Journey.
Yeah, imagine.
What is your current obsession? What are you focused on right now?
Oh God. There's a couple things.
I'm all rip.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of weird because I have my work life where I actually work at a hospice home. And then I have all these other things that I'm doing, which are like, I'm writing and I'm blogging and I'm trying to like get my book out there in the universe. But I'm working on my vulnerability because, so that's one of my obsessions is trying to not be so like afraid of being out there in the universe with a book. And compassion in healthcare is actually a huge obsession of mine because I feel like if we can change culture in our healthcare, we can actually change the experience for nurses, for doctors, for patients. That seems kind of like a big thing. And I just started an improv class lately. I don't know if I'm obsessed with it, but
Improv?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh, interesting.
yeah.
I saw a few improv shows before. And they're super funny. I think you've seen an improv show as well.
In Austin, we've seen one.
Yeah, in Austin we've seen a little bit of improv, a little comedy. But there's a Chicago place I used to go to once. I went there like maybe 4 or 5 times. And it was people doing improv, and that takes some balls to do improv on a stage. That's for sure. Yeah, 'cause I can't do it.
Yeah, I think I chose that maybe kind of working on my vulnerability, because I do feel like
100%.
a little timid. So
Yeah,
that helps me.
that 100% teach you like that not to be vulnerable, because it's literally a stage and like the lights pointing at you and everyone's focused on you. So it's like that's like the like scariest position you could be in for some people, and it's definitely gonna help you grow as a person. Regarding your
You're leaning
book,
into your fear, which is amazing.
yeah, regarding your book, is it gonna be about the culture? What is the title of it? When is it coming out?
Oh yeah, it's called, I have 2 books. I have Some Light at the End, and it's a end of life guidebook for patients and their caregivers. And it's really just about hospice and what it is, what it isn't, and what to expect when you're dying, and all the nursey stuff that we have to teach patients and families about education, medication management, anxiety management, energy, mobility, all the things. And then the end of life and what it looks like and how you can care for someone at the end of life. So I have Some Light at the End. That's been out for a little while. And then I just released The Power and Pain of Nursing. And it's a 30-day guidebook with self-care practices to replenish compassion.
Nice, smooth. Yeah, it's really good. It's something because in nursing school, I'm really glad you wrote those books, because in nursing school we have like maybe 1 hour of a whole semester that's devoted to maintaining self-care as nurses in our future, and then maybe another hour that same day about end-of-life care and hospice. We do like those are 2 main things we know absolutely minimal about leaving nursing school and entering nursing field.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know. I mean, isn't that sad? It's really sad because both of them are really significant parts of healthcare journeys. And so I think, I write things that I feel like I need more knowledge in. So
That's awesome.
Thank you for spreading your goodness and helping nurses develop self-compassion.
thanks, guys, for being nurse warriors.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Where can people find you?
BethCavenaugh.com.
Awesome. And the books are available on Amazon. Where do you get the books?
And all other places that sell books. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate your time.
Thanks, you guys.